The courtroom smelled of old paper, dust, and quiet judgment. Then the laughter came sharp and sudden, slicing through the air like a blade just as the poor single father stood alone before the bench, his shoulders slumped, his worn jacket hanging on him like a borrowed life, his eyes tired from nights without sleep and years without mercy. And before the story goes any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that the world can still surprise us in the most unexpected ways, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, subscribe to the channel for more stories that touch the heart, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because this story begins where dignity was almost lost and ends where justice finally remembered what it was meant to be. Daniel Carter had walked into that courtroom carrying more than a thin folder of documents. He carried the weight of raising his 8-year-old daughter Emily alone since her mother passed away, the weight of overdue rent notices folded carefully in his pocket, the weight of working 2 exhausting jobs while still showing up every morning to braid Emily's hair and pack her lunch with a smile he barely had the strength to fake, and now he stood accused in a civil case that threatened to take away the small apartment they called home, accused of negligence by a powerful landlord represented by polished lawyers who barely looked at him as human. And when the judge glanced down at Daniel's frayed shoes and trembling hands, a laugh escaped her lips, not loud, not cruel on the surface, but sharp enough to cut, the kind of laugh that says you don't belong here, the kind that reminds the poor of their place. And the courtroom stirred with uncomfortable energy as Daniel felt his face burn. Not from anger, but from shame he had swallowed too many times before. Daniel did not argue, did not raise his voice, he did not plead dramatically, because life had taught him that noise rarely helps people like him. Instead he stood quietly, explaining his situation in steady words, describing how a broken heating system he had reported countless times had led to unsafe conditions, how he withheld rent only after months of being ignored, how he only wanted a safe place for his child, but every sentence felt like it fell into a void, dismissed before it could land. And as the judge waved a hand impatiently, Daniel realized this was never about facts, it was about power, and power had already chosen a side. What no one in that room knew was that Daniel Carter was not just a struggling delivery driver and night janitor, he was also a man who had once worn the highest robes in the land, a man who had stepped away from the Supreme Court years earlier under a sealed agreement to protect the identity and safety of his family after a high-profile threat. A man who chose anonymity and obscurity over privilege when his wife died and his daughter needed a father more than the nation needed a justice, a secret so deeply buried that even the legal system had forgotten him, and Daniel had kept that secret not out of fear, but out of love. As the proceedings continued, the laughter echoed in his mind, reminding him of every door slammed in his face since he chose a quiet life, of every time he was overlooked, underestimated, and unseen, and something shifted inside him, not rage, but resolve, the kind that comes when a man realizes that silence can sometimes protect injustice just as much as it protects peace. With calm hands, Daniel reached into his folder and produced a single document, yellowed slightly with age but unmistakable in authority, a sealed certificate bearing a crest that made the room fall unnaturally still as it was passed forward, and when the judge's eyes scanned the page, the color drained from her face, the laughter dying in her throat as recognition struck like lightning. The courtroom transformed in seconds, whispers spreading like wildfire, lawyers stiffening, clerks frozen mid-motion, as the realization settled that the man they had dismissed, the father they had mocked, who was once, then legally still recognized as, a Supreme Court justice, his resignation never formally enacted, his identity protected but his authority intact, and the silence that followed was heavier than any gavel strike. Daniel did not smile, did not savor the moment, because this was never about revenge, it was about truth finally standing upright in a room that had forgotten how to look at it, and as the judge struggled to regain composure, the power dynamic shifted completely, exposing how fragile arrogance becomes when confronted with humility backed by integrity. The case unraveled quickly after that, not because Daniel demanded special treatment, but because the facts were finally examined without bias, the landlord's negligence laid bare, the imbalance of power acknowledged, and the ruling that followed ensured not only Daniel's housing security but set a precedent protecting countless other tenants who had been silenced by fear and poverty. Yet the true transformation happened after the courtroom emptied, when Daniel walked home under a fading sky, holding Emily's small hand as she skipped beside him, unaware of titles or robes, only knowing that her father had come back smiling for the first time in a long while, and in that quiet moment, Daniel understood that justice is not about who sits highest, but who kneels low enough to see others clearly. If this story is starting to move something inside you, if you are feeling that ache of recognition or hope, stay with it, because the ending isn't just about a courtroom, it's about all of us. Daniel never returned to the Supreme Court, choosing instead to continue his simple life, but he became something far greater in the process, a reminder whispered through legal circles, a lesson taught without words, that dignity does not depend on wealth, and that every person deserves to be heard before they are judged. And as this story reaches its final moments, we have a special request for you. Please comment below with one word that describes how this story made you feel, because your voice matters here. And if this story touched your heart, if it reminded you to look twice at people the world laughs at too quickly, please like, comment, and share this video so more hearts can be reached, because sometimes the greatest justice isn't handed down from the highest court, it's carried quietly by those who choose compassion when the world expects silence.